Chief Justice William Rehnquist, and Chief Justice Rehnquist had as one of his law clerks later to be Chief Justice John Roberts. And so there is a kind of apostolic succession there on the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, as you'll see tomorrow, some of Justice Jackson's greatest insights don't seem to have taken with his successors. That's one of the things that you do have to worry about. I think there's something really interesting about the kind of international law connection that we've kind of seen tonight. And that's something that I'm going to say a little bit about tomorrow. So I hope that I don't spoil my lecture tomorrow entirely by saying some of the things tonight that I'm also going to say tomorrow. But I'm just going to tell you a story about a dinner that I was at about 8 or 9 years ago at a conference of civil rights lawyers. And I was sitting next to a man named Albie Sachs. I don't know how many of you know Albie, but you've seen him here? Right. Yeah. So you'll know that Albie Sachs was a South African civil rights lawyer who ended up spending many years in prison in South Africa. And later, after he was in exile, the South African secret police firebombed his car. He was blinded in one eye and lost one of his arms. And I was sitting at dinner with him at this very casual dinner, and one of the people at my table did not know who Albie Sachs was and said afterwards, "Why was that man eating his lamb chop with one hand?" And I said, "Because he doesn't have his other hand." And she said, "I didn't even notice that. He was so engaging and everything. I never noticed that he, was missing one of his arms." But I was talking to Justice Sachs, and he said to me, "Guess who my favorite Supreme Court justices are?" And I thought for a moment, and it was obvious who the first one was. It was William J. Brennan, Jr. And the reason that was obvious is that Justice Brennan was kind of a liberal lion of the Supreme Court, and of course Justice Sachs is a liberal lion. Justice Brennan had written a number of opinions on free speech and freedom of expression, which is something that Justice Sachs cared a lot about. And then he said, no one ever guesses who my second favorite justice is. And I actually guessed, and it was Robert Jackson. And I asked Justice Sachs why Justice Jackson was his favorite. And he said, "Well, why don't you try and guess?" And I said, my first guess was because Justice Jackson was such an incredibly lucid thinker and writer. And he had a way of framing the issues that made you see them in a totally new light. And Justice Sachs has that same kind of skill at explaining the issues in a way that makes you see them differently. And he said, yes, I think Justice Jackson was the best stylist on the Supreme Court, the best writer of all the Supreme Court justices I've read. And so one of the things I'm going to hope to do tomorrow is to take some of those key passages in Justice Jackson's work and show you how they have resonance for some of the issues that are in front of the Supreme Court today. Issues relating to the power of the federal government to solve contemporary problems, the way the government should deal with wartime civil rights and civil liberties, and I think also the way that we deal with the question of the protection of minority groups in America. That all of those are things that we still think about in ways that are so inflected by what Justice Jackson did that sometimes we don't even recognize that. And you'll notice I've even left out the one that probably those of you who've gone to law school are most familiar with it, which is the steel worker, the steel seizure case trilogy as well. So I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow and talking about Justice Jackson.